Hello and welcome to Top Story. A moment of history in the Himalayan kingdom of Nepal today as its people go to the polls to elect a constitutional assembly tasked with transforming the country's system of government. Wedged between India and China, Nepal, a country of 27 million inhabitants, is only just emerging from a decade of civil war and the mass street protests that 2 years ago brought an end to 240 years of absolutist monarchy. The first task facing the assembly will be to find a new system of government to replace it. After 10 years of fighting, Nepal's Maoist guerrillas have put down their weapons to contest the election. The electoral campaign, though, has been marred by violence, much of it the fault of the Maoist youth wing, which is accused of beating up rivals and threatening voters. But it's not all been one way. 6 Maoists were shot dead by the security forces earlier this week after a clash with supporters of a rival party. But what will happen once the elections are over? Can agreement be reached on a new democratic form of government? Well, joining me now to discuss those and other questions is Alain Lombal, who's a specialist on the region and author of the book Insurrection and Terrorism in South Asia. Thanks very much for being on Top Story. The conditions for this electoral campaign have hardly been ideal, have they? Lots of violence.
Yes, it's certainly not ideal as a campaign, but however, the main thing to mention is that these elections do happen. And that's, of course, a great event for this kingdom, because it is still a kingdom.
And if you think where Nepal was just a few years ago with a ferocious guerrilla campaign under the way, the Maoists who were taking part in these elections were at that stage in the jungles fighting the government.
Yeah, they had been fighting against the government since 1996, and altogether 13,000 people were killed. And finally, the Maoists joined the democratic process for the campaign. But however, they joined the democratic process, but we are not sure actually about what they have in their mind. Depends on the results of the elections, of course.
Exactly. And why do you think have they decided, at least for the moment, to put down their guns?
They have decided to put down their gun because they think they can conquer power through elections. But if they do not achieve their aim through democracy, then there is a danger again that they go back. May not be to the jungle, but they may organize big demonstrations in the big towns, and of course, especially in the capital city, Kathmandu.
What chance, though, do you think there is of the Maoists winning a victory?
It's very difficult to say because they have been, behaving very, very badly during the campaign. They kidnapped people, they did extortions. There was a lot of intimidation, and of course, people are very much conscious about that. And the event also recently in Tibet may have a negative impact for the Maoists, because people may think that after all, the Maoism is a Chinese concept, even if it is not, of course, being used now in China. So maybe it's difficult to predict what will happen actually in these elections.
Their leader, Prachandra, says that the Maoists have no desire for a socialist revolution in Tibet. All they want is to get rid of feudalism.
Yes, he says so.
Should you believe him or not?
Well, it's difficult to believe. He says so, but he definitely wants to suppress the royalty, and many people think that in a way the kingdom should be abolished.
It does seem to have run its time, doesn't it? There doesn't seem to be much popular support left for the monarchy.
Yeah, I mean, many people want to finish with the monarchy, that is sure, and probably that will happen, whatever the result of the elections. But Prachanda has got personal ambitions as well. He wants to be the first president of the new republic. And we shall see what happens.
Is he going to do it?
Well, it depends on the results, of course, but he says that if the elections are not carried out normally, then he may start demonstration. But what does it mean by elections being normal? Maybe for him, the election will not be normal if he does not win. And in that case...
Is there any question at all that the Constituent Assembly will not abolish the monarchy? Is there a chance that it might just survive in some sort of form?
Yes, yes. There are still,
A
of course,
parliamentary monarchy, for instance.
yes, there are still some partisans, of course, for the monarchy, but they are, I think, a minority now. Even the main traditional party, the Nepali Congress, is now in favor of abolishing the monarchy. So there is very little chance indeed that the monarchy remains, but we never know, of course. There is still a chance. Some people in the south of the country would like the monarchy to go on in the area which is called the Terai, close to India.
There are big issues for the Constitutional Assembly to decide, apart from the issue of the monarchy. It has to balance a lot of different interests, caste, ethnicity, gender as well. These are big issues in Nepal.
Yes, Nepal, in fact, is not an homogeneous country. There are a lot of different ethnic people. I mean, half the population live in the Terai, which I just mentioned. And those people are very much different from the people who live in the hills and, of course, in the mountains. There are three parts, in fact, in Nepal. The southern part of it, which is flat, the hill areas where is Kathmandu, the capital, and in the north, the highest mountains, including the Everest, of course. So it's not homogeneous at all.
The elections had to be postponed a couple of times because of unrest in the south as well.
Yes, there is a lot of unrest in the south because the people in the south, who constitute about more than 30% of the whole population, they want to have a kind of autonomy. They consider themselves to be very much different from the people from the hills and the mountains, and they considered to have been left out in the preceding years.
And there's an international dimension to this, of course, because Nepal is wedged between India and China.
Absolutely. Nepal is wedged between two giants, China in the north with Tibet and India in the south. And there is a lot of implications, of course, for these countries. For the moment, the trade of Nepal with the external world depends on India because most of the imports and exports have to go through India. But it may change in the future because China is making a lot of efforts, successful efforts, we must say, to develop the infrastructure in Tibet, including, of course, the railway line, which now goes to Lhasa and which later on will go to the Nepalese border.
So they'll be watching that with great interest in Nepal.
Yes, Nepal wants to not to be dependent only on India. And of course, if the Maoists get the power, they will get closer to China because the Maoists definitely are very much anti-Indians.
And that, I'm afraid, is all we have time for today. We'll have to end it there. Thanks to our guest, Alain Lombal. Join us again tomorrow for another edition of Top Story. Goodbye.